Hey guys, we're going to replace the differential in my son's Latrax Prerunner today. Not that difficult. There are a lot of screws involved. There are only two different sizes, so at least it's not too challenging to get them back in the right spot. Typically, if I put them in there and they don't grab any meat on the bottom, I pull it out and put the longer one in. I try to keep track and try to have it somewhat of a system, but you eventually learn, if there's anything to screw into underneath the part you're trying to remove, then you could tell by then the length of the screw that's necessary. All right, so essentially, I feel like it's the front diff that we're having trouble with. The rear seems fine. And as you can hear from the clip at the beginning of the video, we got some real grinding, some slipping. We've been beating this thing up in the snow for most of the winter. So I bought some parts to replace one side. Hopefully that'll do it. And the parts are inexpensive. So we're gonna give it a shot. So basically everything's plug and play on the front as far as shocks and camber links, steering links, they just pop off. I think we have about 11 screws here to remove. This will essentially remove the body post mount and the diff cover. That all comes off. That blue panel there you'll see shortly all comes off as one. Here we go. Almost. Yeah, so this is the diff here. We are starting in the front. We will see what kind of shape it's in. So if you compare the two sides, the right-hand side looks a lot sharper and the grooves look deeper. So the left side's definitely compromised. I think we're going to go ahead and change the diff in the front here. So now we're taking apart the rear, just camber links, no steering links, because this truck doesn't have steering in the back end also. And essentially we're just gonna fillet this baby like a fish and just take that whole top cover off and expose the drive shaft while we're at it. Probably should have bought a new spur gear too, but hopefully it's in good shape and we won't need to do that at this time. I am trying to show you guys the length of the screws when I remember to focus in on them in front of the camera. Again, there's only two lengths, so it's not too difficult. It might feel deceiving to take this apart. It kind of makes a bit of a mess, but everything makes sense when it goes back together. So now we're exposing the spur gear, which will come off with the drive shaft. We're also exposing the pinion gear to the motor, which the motor will stay in place. There we go. So what I don't show here is you just have to disconnect the linkage to the servo and able to flip that over. Again, it just pops off with a set of needle nose pliers. There's a brace there, it's really important. And then here's the cover to the spur gear. Here comes the drive shaft. It has an input gear and one little bearing on either end. It's the only size bearing, so you really can't mess these four pieces up. I just soak all the pieces in some rubbing alcohol, essentially. Give them a swish around, dry them off, lube them up a bit, and slap them back in. So here's the rear diff, and I believe it should be okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm squishing these will mushroom out a little bit due to the torque from the dog bones and the drive shafts. Tried to focus in on that gear. It does look good, and I'm just going to clean these parts up and put them right back in where I found them. Try to get a little focus on this one also. Just going to brush the teeth on this spur. Haha. That's pretty much it. We're going to spill them out of here, give them some silicone spray, and just slam them right back in. So I do show shortly in a bit. Hopefully There's some detail as to putting this back together. There are many little pieces, but it's not too overwhelming. And also the instructions to the new differential have a nice diagram to put that together. So these two differentials are identical. They're typical to one another. Not sure if it's frowned upon, but I choose to put a little white bearing grease on these parts. And I've actually run this truck since this voiceover that I've done for this video, and it runs smoother than ever, considering even the fact that likely much of my bearings are probably shot from the winter driving this season, but I just threw them right back in. I just cleaned them up, lubed them up, and reused them. So there I just put the bearings and the input gears on each end. And you could tell when you try to fit this, it only fits one way. And the diff also only goes in one way. There's a pin in the body sticking up, which would hit the spur gear if you put it the other way. It's a really good design. Here's the new diff. I basically just took it out of the package, put some grease on it, and you'll see that the bearings just fit in the carrier. So you really can't mess this up. Here's the diagram I was speaking of. It lays out all the little gears really easily. So that's it. We're reassembling at this point. Just the cover to the spur gear and that little brace, which is very important. And I'm just trying to show here that that bulkhead that pin needs to fit in that hole. Therefore, so all the steering will sway and not be bound up. Sorry, my view here is not ideal, but hopefully it paid some attention taking it apart. I'll have a good idea as to where the screws go. They're pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, like I said, I've already run this truck and it feels really good. You can tell that there's less drag and it's not spinning and there's more power to the wheels. So I think this differential was I don't even know. I think it was $10 Canadian. So it's a lot of fun. And I love that the parts are super cheap for these vehicles. There's a better view. Should have did that earlier. I usually skip through all the screws, but I figured because there were so many with this build that I think a lot of people would desire the detail. So hopefully there's enough detail there without making it too long of a video and boring. Informative at that too. All right, what I wanted to mention also, when you're removing that blue plate with the body posts on it, I don't take the bumper right off, as you notice, and you basically have to just peel that bumper forward when you remove it. You'll figure it out. Now, here's a key part here. The drive shafts need to fit in those drive cups. That's what engages the wheel to the gearing. If you don't pay attention, it could flop out, and you'll put your camber links and steering links on, and to realize that your drive shaft isn't connected. It's not a major, but it just saves you. Here we go, it goes in right here. You can just turn the wheel so that the slot and the pins on the drive shaft or the dog bone line up. There you go. Easy breezy. Yeah, everything on this truck is so easy to work on. Like, these just clip in. I'm not sure if the plastics will eventually wear, but you're not even taking off screws or nuts and bolts to remove these shocks. It makes it nice and easy to work on. You can rip this thing apart in just minutes. There you go. This feels great. It's opposing one another, and there's no binding. So now the servo horn, or the link to the servo rather, to the steering. And this will basically conclude the front end, and we'll move to put the rear together. There you go. Nope. You want to feel for binding. You want to make sure that all feels very natural. Okay, rock on. Coming close. Once again here, you'll be able to tell when you install this. See, I peeled that front bumper forward just to get out of the way. You could remove that bumper for a matter of 2 or 4 more screws. It's not a major though. And you can tell it just plopped right into place. Provided those bearings on the differential are sitting in the carriers properly, this thing will sit right down and you just drive these screws home. Yeah, I finally learned how to zoom in on this video, guys. Hopefully it's a little more helpful. I wish I had done it in the videos prior. Excuse me. Small screw there, doesn't show. There's a tiny screw fits there. That's covering the pinion side of the motor. Long screws here. We are close. If I was to complain about one thing though, I wish they would put a little hex on here as opposed to the Phillips screw. I'm never a fan of the Phillips screw and they strip pretty easily. These ones have held up quite a bit for the amount that I've taken this truck apart, but I'd prefer hex. Okay, now let's just plug and play. Once again, the drive shafts, ensure that they're in the drive cups. Just slam these pieces back in. Yeah, so I recommend, you know, you might have to spend a couple bucks, so these things do break often, but great truck, great to learn on. There we go. Whammo, complete. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Smooth as butter. Please subscribe. Put your notifications on, guys. Peace.